Good afternoon, everyone. Please listen with the Mahayana motivation of Buddhist.
ju chik tse kala Nyerju mira toma marmeta Yodor samu tsochi jibe kang stati tsekamba nike tendo tanga zote teso tsama tu jendo me baga nga zon chupare ton ni tsopare tso ni sana san sang chupa dondo kole mexar te kyachon domba kapso tsokna ne teso diga kama te kyatsama ondo kole tate woni san kare o tere Ranju je nyamcha xiaope jan yinju tar lara nawe zasong lazo nam nyambe gyongje to meni be chorde tinje kai chepe ne se chopa kongwe leji sor chubar se ba la se la tapki kare koris tanga so nyomo bande je maze ji parta ta nyomo ba se je na nyomo ba de tonda ha mao go parta Sangha nyomo ba se ya korte mango chi che ka mari nyomo ba te tonda kare yin ba te hakwa ma so nyomo ba ha mao go ni nyomo ba te ke sang so pa chi tsam do ko ha ko chana ko na pang go ma ko na ka ha yo ma re ko na te yi xin a lo so ba me wa te de tin ko ri na san son ke je so chu par se ba la jer yu long nam ne se yo ge se yo ji cho nam phong bo tin so Java Chatoram Java Kongtrol Sayosi Sojum Songo Kandu Zeti Shanko Yori Sama Sancho Semji Sama Sancho Senti Pachimbo Dinane Kongone Chane Concepta Dondam Yi Vanane Donda Sancho Sem Tata Soda Sama Kukimbo Dongji Semji Gong Tsordan Chepar Kongtrol Dasar David Sorto, Top Tekmo, Goma, Gomba Tingin, Nelo, Mayo Sorto, Song Yi, Rangi Goma, Lato Yenebe, Lato Toba Yenebe, Neta, Nejor the Hiba, Hibe, Topgyal Goma, Sung, so Song Yoris. Tago Tate Carres in the so called so Tawan Tomi Gun Hakon, or the Tawan Tomi Rimji, so Kanya, but the so Tawa Chuzi Kazine, Yobada, they for Naranga Hako Togari. Then you saw the said the Kinova so Chupa, Pu, Damze, Dang, Socha, Yo, Lenke, Du, Yuchang Konga, Dende. Lama Tratop so Maya, Taki need to be boarding goes on. Lingia say, I think it's okay. Lingia Kupala, in the Kama, and so then go on the castle and go Kangu the Jolly. Tell in the Kama, put on Kang Kodri, they are Hakotoko, and so they Lobatas, Katsi need Chimbori, the Katsi Samori, Sanga Chua in the Sangia Kodri, then the Sanga, then I do there's some sort of 다 그 제름도 조름도 조과 침보 대성 조업에서 냠니 세거리 대도 마하요 제름도 조세 이제 가서도 더 소페 개침보리도 그래서 유장 효과 어리 나라 잡아서 마야 탑지 니 드빈 거네 서다를 이희정하고 선별리도 매도소 여러 주바 나보 무향지 띵세 메도 추바 나가 메도도 보면서 소바니주 심주니주 단나주 너요 나가다 소바다 사마미라 도섬 무향지 띵세네 음저지티 무슨 요라다 이주 추바 니 정가서 그 전도 메바다 상하냠네 세대가 특히에 거들이 무슨 요로 추바 강 톱도 향고 내가 세나세니 말이 소소 메는 메레를 마도 유는 세나 총세니 세나세는 세나 맞어 이제 고음 메도에는 저 추바 가래에 제조마도 봐. 대 탐케 어저츠도 마살라도 여러 집이 추바리요 말이야. 신절라고 말이야. 핑크 말이. 안 추바 최종 가래 향나 때라 뒤전도 센다 자원이는 뭐 성어 돈이 향고들이 디세는 이쪽이 눈벽이 추바도 전에 이쪽 건도 상보 얘네 다강 때라 세나세야 용사가 열려 말이야. 세나세야 용사가 열 등에 이제 규열이 론덴 하산 뷰더리 론덴 하산 뷰더라 세나세야 용사가 열 자원이는 미리 무슨 결혼 초바텔라 세나 랩거 뭐네 랩거 예 초바 파프서 초바 지선 장이 말이 최종 마도건 초바 퍼차도 대 가능성이 제가데 주도 총이 다니 말이 야라 라마라 퍼난다 제로 탐지라 퍼난다 군조 자와슴제 다소 경걸 교바라 퍼난다 퍼차와 네 류당 차와로 류당 차티 초대를 지선 장거 야오마 멀리께서 야보 경버 머차르지서 가서 긴디시 대lập cái chuyện bỏ đi đó để cái chuyện bỏ đi đó lưu tăng sát cái tăng bỏ đi có cái tăng là cái tăng là y tăng sam tăng là lưu tăng sát sao vậy ý chí nằm cái chung không bao đó cứ cái chế bảo nằm cái chung không bao giờ nằm sao đó đó cái đó bao giờ ha giờ có đó số cái ha cái sinh ra làm được cái nằm cái chung không nằm cái chung không bao giờ nằm cái thế là tung vậy 강도 저 처음 말이에요 배 치는데 봐 열는데 봐 망보적인 추바다 삼노다 데라 나카 강화도는 나카 강도 좋아 말이야 나카 거라 또 말이야 데라 야친도 연발에 치리는 나카 강화스 킹바를 그 제발랑 예적 접반남지 주주 공화 당시 때랑 이유 뭐 나타도 이다 나 루다 데코나니 이제 또저 장리도 람바인 서기 공화 잡아는 더즈 상주 미라도선 더즈가 미 마친가 라다 발랭가 토마 나서가 좀아 예 다땡아 소가 협정도니 가서라 협정가 강치 남세야데 데렘 거데 람바인도 렘 거데 다 쳔거는데 마르메 자자 향거데 다데라 미라 자자 향거데 다 발랭 토마 자자 향거 소다 다키 자자 향거데 데다 드롬에 다 데라 아데라 군족견 추바데도 동담 내로견 추바 마르메가 깝살라 타고 디 나조 차득 도센데 나나 라미르도 책데도 통보장장 해근도 마메 도마는라 미 라타 도마 바랭 가레 데나는 마르메데라 코 투가케 나게 론로도 레파 체버도 거 나와 야라 야르는 차참만 버거들이 다 투가케 냠니 세버 깝서 대고호들이 투가 냠니 세도 괜나 조바팀 냠니 세거나 나서 로마 예보안 담제기 제지 총지도 세대 오야 레진 총지도 세대 내로게랑이 스타트업게 공화세 내로게랑이 대코나니게 내로 셈비 등에 대코나니 추자다 추지 버자다 버지 영다 르과 일미 숭족도 담벌거들 따와 침벌이다 따와 지 지나서 범자는 사제 침범은 조바 침범에서 조바 침범은 냠닌 저바 세키나 단다서 펜저바 침범 저바 간저 옹들시나 마다 번치바나 진저바 레코 초라서 냠니 신도 저게 냠니 되게 지나서라 니치를 레코는 니치 되다 단단히 저런 거데 된 저런도 다 지나서라 라파르트 셈나 로지라고 가리리시나 오 상가라 템르 나 상가라 템르 창가라 셈코라는 저바 쳔보레 단데 저바 쳔보도 야고 네로그랑이 스타트업 공화세야데 데이터 상와 데리다 남바 상와 담공 미드 송게 우적게 초게 예주 단 조르와다 간 조르와 성저도 다 조르게 추바다 조르게 강와다 조르 다 더서 다원도 모리 다 더서게 데이터에서 요네 인지기 전에 요거리면 데라 데이터랑 ngaso ngone tane ka tawan thomboda jawake namjo phomo ke ju rawori songda rawa tergo samchojin porlo ngude de nga ju pinjin naro nga sama lama pinjin naro bada teloba nangi nga nyama ka trota ngoro Rinpoche ta ta jambar ki ni de kher senga ta bama mantra la so bada nuchi sanji ki ta dyanangi ka trota thamji ke chojin porlo porta de 아주 야간 특징도 소리 보고 보다 무엇에 대리 대나 다대라 나서 다다 논처 첨본 요거데 잡잡 하자 레바기 잡잡 거데 잡잡 마면 부 아주 되게 망보 펑ță 담보 부 상하게 취대 하자 다잡 첨본이 있는 느끼 산지 이게 냐 차시서라 너 차상 메라리 차리 아 차상 다 대 다잡 현재 하자 겨저리는 야간이 말아 큐로케 망보 레벨 간르리시나 야 디캅 데두 자가니 말 보도게 다침보 접도 보면 하게 남저 보면 빼 코란서 할레바기 남저 추진 통보리 데라데네 아핀다다 망보 마용 총게 치던라고다 세르게 치던라고다 다 된다게 디나게 nga 접도 nga 남저 봐 nga 소진 거도 응원해 세니 든드게 레가 조조 세저로 봐베네 레가 레데네 nga 치사고 냐스 Deni Jini Pin Dada George Party Ataka Bola Pedu, Sahak Chumbo Makolari. Dem Sahak La Kegon, George Party Ataka Water, Jagalomba the Miri. Jagalomba the Miri over Hitch or Tendri Yore. Tanhaji Makola, book and Neda can chance of the Kohako. Book kind of Pons. Ko ha going to Hak Makolas, Hate, Captain George Party Ataka, Hajan, he's Muna, Bugalomba Chatsamo Topomachano. Then he got it in a Neda there in Dila Yazo Nilem. Nam your Pale called it, Nam your Homo Trangi Pale for it, Piparo Tene Malo. Chulonki, Malonki, Pemambolem, take a task as well. They Nora or it, and Dalaka, Nora, Dichito, did up they do, Bulla, Tupachim, Hokimotana, Pigeon, the Georgia Party at the Chani, Tupachim, so Chokimos in the Gadamba Gats, to see Nangalamado, Georgia Party at the Sahanya, Halle Baka, Pertasor, Kepa, Yanibari, the Mazilla, Delape. Tana Jo and Gana Jodorus Ayatela, Halepa Sangalamiji, you read the detail Lendo Tamando, Marala, Katsilekando, Tata Yanis, Mahayo, Anu Yoga, Mahayo, the Kieram Kandasaka, Anu Yoga, Zoranadine, Zalon, take some Rama Kandata. Other Zoba Chimbo, Sam Korang Jambandi, Sam at the Zoba Chimbo, or Kokare Taturn in the Trolam within our Sen Rama Kanda Nando Kanda runs toward Nyomo Kanda runs toward Nyomo Seria the Goka Yori, Seria the Goka Yori, Nyomo Tonga Mina, Yikinag, Sandra with the Chokimbo Lebio, Nyomo Tonga Lopa Risona, told the Yondra, the Yajarsona, go mean and Yondra, go there go, the Pecha Yagana, Tata Pecha Yagana, Tata. Anu Zate Longsum the Rama, Anna Zata Longsum with Yanisogana, the Taco Kimbo minutes Zate Longsum the Rama Tom, you put down Zario Mari, Zadam, the Taco Kimbo, then the Chapango Mari. Then they court the Woni Hakotum, Kaleka, the Sahan Yanisi, the Hakotum, or Matojaga. Tata let you meet the Chana, so Lama de Tijakikamari. So Katil Lependo Hakone, Dicas Rims, Chulota, there's a Nikatimbo, Sojan Polo Musamsi, Jim turned the Dadangas of Saint Jim turned Sojan Chupatana, Pino Chimbo the Tempe, the Danam, the two Giva Chimbo, Tamsing also come Saos, but they Jim turned the Dadangas of Song of the Day.
Moho nyebe nyobe mor lenga. Jung da lenga ke chittasadhana. Menga ki yigi da tanaya nasu yigi nyebe nyobe sana. Ngane jung tsichamo. Naso. Kaso naso kesha jung na da moho ke sekta. Shenda ke sekta chitta kare ya pate. Shenda ke Kepa Chancho did something you been serio. Even Kepa gets sick child like never sick chick. Similar. So this morning we went through the explanation of the practice of confession, especially in the context of the communal practices such as the subtle essence, Padmasambhava, and other practices connected with the peaceful and lawful deities for the sake of the purification of samaya. And we also saw that to a lesser extent or in a briefer form, this type of confession is present also in any of our ceremonies, for example, the 10th and 25th day practices. The second aspect of samaya purification after confession is what is called fulfillment. And there are three parts to this. There's what Guru Rinpoche has to say, then there's what Jamgon Lodro Thaye has to say about what Guru Rinpoche has to say, and then there's what Lama has to say about what Jamgon Lodro Thaye has to say. So, first, Guru Rinpoche is brief. Jamgon Lodro Thaye goes on quite long, and Lama went on in between the two, not quite as long as it could be. Okay. Yeah. Fulfill and please the deities through presentation of the usual offerings, or common offerings, amrita, drakpa, terma, lamps or butter lamps, and profound union and liberation in the context of the feast. So that's Guru Rinpoche's presentation. Now, so why do we need this second step? If confession and the purification practices of body, speech, and mind that were explained this morning are sufficient, as they indeed are, to purify ourselves of wrongdoing, why do we need to go on and do this practice that's called fulfillment? It may help to go back to the Tibetan word, kama, and it has three sort of different ways you can look at it in this context, which is why you may see in liturgies that were translated at different times, even by the same person, including me, different translations, satisfaction, fulfillment, and so on. Koma just means to fill. So, to fill a glass. But it has the implication of remedying a lack, remedying an omission or a lack. And it also has the connotation of bringing satisfaction to the unsatisfied. So in order to understand Jamgon Lodro Thaye's explanation here, it may help to think of two different translations at the same time. One is fulfillment, because you are fulfilling your samaya by making these offerings. But the other is satisfaction. You are satisfying the deities. Now, this is the starting point of why it's necessary, but also the hardest aspect of this to understand. As Lama pointed out at different phases of going through this explanation, the practice of fulfillment, or kongwa, is operating at the same time from several different levels of the view. As you'll see when we go through the details, and as those of you who are familiar, especially with the subtle essence Padmasambhava ceremony, may remember, there are aspects of it that, as Lama said, involve the most subtle and rarefied ideas associated with the practice of Dzogchen. And so in one sense, the practice of fulfillment is most closely associated with what we could call the highest view, or the highest outlook, which basically means non-duality. But at the same time, it is also, as all our practices are, a concession to where we are at. And what that means is that although we aspire to a view of non-duality, as will be explained in our text, we're not there yet. We're still subject to doubt. Well, what we doubt is the non-duality of our mind and the deities. So, from a beginner's point of view, and you'll see that this is very much also embraced in the liturgy, at the same time as the liturgy speaks of non-duality. From a beginner's point of view, one is attempting to placate or propitiate displeased deities, as Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Thaye says. Now, they're not actually displeased. As we say in our protector liturgies, Buddhas don't get pissed off. They don't get angry. They can't be. The deities are the five wisdoms. Five wisdoms don't get pissed off. But we are so used to our own way of being that we are liable to project displeasure onto wisdom deities. So from the most basic point of view, and we're going to kind of take a journey in the next few minutes up through the views. From the most basic point of view, the attitude with which we approach fulfillment is one of apology. Presenting gifts in apology. So it is an attitude of reconciliation with the wisdom deities. And thereby, as Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Thaye says, fulfilling your samaya and thereby obviating the need for their punishment. Now, wisdom deities don't actually punish us, but we may experience it that way because of how we project things. So on the most basic level, fulfillment is the fulfillment of our samaya, the propitiation of, and the propitiation and satisfaction of the deities. In the Tantras and Agamas, there are many different ways of doing this, which basically amount to all the different things you could offer in restitution or in reconciliation. Principally, externally, you offer the material things, such as the offerings that are placed on the shrine and feast offering. Internally, you offer your own aggregates, including your body, as a support. And this is done, Lama said, this is important because it's not just simply I offer you my body as your servant. It does include that idea. But it's also an acknowledgement of the fact that your body is already the temple inhabited by these deities. For example, principally we engage in these practices focused on the peaceful and Ramal deities, who, as we know, and as we imagine during those practices, inhabit our physical bodies right now. And then secretly, we offer bodhicitta. We offer the relative bodhicitta of our motivation, our Mahayana motivation, the absolute bodhicitta which is our true nature, the attributes of which are embodied by the deities themselves. And we offer the affect of that true nature, which is great bliss. Then, in specific tantras, for example, there is a tantra in the Mahayoga section called the web of net of magical illusion, or Mayajala. There is a peaceful and wrathful deity tantra called, you could say, dredging samsara from its depths, or the harrowing. Literally, it's harrowing. But nobody knows that anymore unless you've had Christian training, then you know about the harrowing of hell. Otherwise, lay people don't get it, so it's easier to say dredging. But it's called the harrowing, sometimes it's called the harrowing of hell, but often just the harrowing of samsara. And in that tantra, which is one of the scriptural sources for the peaceful and wrathful deities practices we do, it talks about one way, one form of fulfillment offering where you fulfill your samaya with the deities by offering your transcendence of delusion. However, Lama said, this brings up the obvious point. For that to be an actual offering, there has to be actual transcendence. And this will come up, we'll come back to this point later, because one of the things about Tantra, he said, is it's wonderful when it works, but you really have to be up to it. If you don't make the grade, you can't fake it. And his history has shown us that that can lead to problems, and he went into details about that. But nevertheless, if you can see the nature of thoughts, as described, for example, in the lineage prayer, which is chanting, then you can offer that insight, that transcendence, according to this Tantra, the Mayajala, for Mahayoga. And so that is how to offer the view itself in fulfillment. And you can also offer the meditation, your meditation on the nature of mind, provided that you can practice it in a state that is free of strain from it, free of moving away from it. Now, this, as highfalutin and unapproachable as this may sound, we're actually going to return to this in a few minutes, because when we talk about the type of fulfillment that we practice principally, which is called the four pairs, fulfillment through the four pairs, it's all based on that notion that whatever you're offering as a symbol of that kind of transcendence through the view and stability in meditation. As beginners who have not yet achieved that, it is not pretentious for us to make that offering, because we make that offering in the state of aspiration. We may not have achieved the consummate wisdom represented by the butter lamps, but by offering the butter lamps, we hope or aspire to achieve it, and so on. So, one aspect of fulfillment is through the outer, inner, and secret. That is, external offerings, the offering of the body as a support or resonance for the deity, and the offering of bodhicitta. Another is through these four pairs, which are essentially an offering based on the unity of view and meditation. And then the third way of offering that is described in the oral tradition of the Nyingpo tradition of Mahayoga is what's called the offering of goodness. And it doesn't just mean the offering of your good deeds, but goodness or responsiveness. It means to recognize, to make offerings in the recognition of the possibility of change, the possibility of transformation. And specifically, the transformation being referred to here is that transformation which is always possible because the deities in their nature and our thoughts in their nature are the same. Now this is tricky, and this brings us back to another point that Lama said is important, and we're going to come back to a little later as well. It's not that our thoughts are junky thoughts, our deities, but the nature of our thoughts and even their proliferation is fundamentally the same as the nature of the deities. That is why there are so many of these deities present within us. And we saw this morning that the reason why there have to be so many rules in the Vajrayana is because we have so many thoughts. And that if we had fewer thoughts, we would need fewer rules. Well, that's looking at it from the point of view of our problems. But looking at it from the point of view of the solution to those problems, because we have so many thoughts, there is the possibility of so many deities. And that possibility of that transformation, that transcendence, and I know this is hard for you to understand, because I see some of you knitting your brows and scratching your heads and whatnot. But that possibility is what's called responsiveness or goodness, that possibility or that key principle of change. So those classifications come fundamentally from the Nyingpo Kama, or the tantras taught by the Buddha himself within the Nyingpo tradition. If we look at the terma tradition, and especially the massive terma cycle that's called the Assembly of Sugatas, we could call it the Uber Mandala or Super Mandala of the 725 deities of the 8 dispensations. There are 5 major types of fulfillment which are prescribed. And these are the offering of select portions, so the first fruits and the first portion of a feast. Then the offering of the brilliant color and light of Samaya substances. The offering of all beings as objects of care. The offering of the external world with its 4 continents and so on as a substitute. So, for example, we practice this when we do the 5-day Atsara puja, because the substitute offering, which is built on that side of the shrine, is called a fulfillment substitute. It's a substitute in the sense that it's basically a simplified model of the world. And the idea is that by offering the world, we protect the world, and we ask the deities to protect the world as well. But by offering it, we're also offering everything we value and everything we cherish. So therefore, it is also an active fulfillment. And then the fifth type of fulfillment, according to the Assembly of Suttas, is the offering is fulfillment through confession, as we saw this morning, through regret and restitution. So there are different classifications of this. And now Jamgon Lodro Thaye puts it all together. It says if we take all of those different ways of classifying the act of fulfillment and put it all together, condense it to its essence, it's basically this. As the first classification said, we can basically classify all fulfillment as outer, inner, or secret. And all of the other categories fit within one or another of these. So first of all, the external or outer fulfillment is the presentation of offerings. And what you are doing as an act of fulfillment or satisfaction in presenting offerings is you are offering them to please and satisfy the wisdom senses of the deities. And that's why there's so much emphasis on the offerings being beautiful. That's why termas, for example, are not just misshapen lumps of barley flour. And I say that and I laugh because my termas, when I used to make termas, you know, there's ugly, there's damn ugly, and then there's pug ugly. Well, my termas were pug ugly. I mean, my termas were so ugly that you couldn't, the most skilled and learned terma maker couldn't look at some of my termas and even tell what they were supposed to be. Like what shape that was supposed to be. You know, it's like, what is that? You know, and the worst part of it was, you know, you start with the dough part, right? And you make the dough shape. And you do your best, and it should look good. But if there's anything a little wrong with it, then it's going to look better because you're decorating, right, with the butter. You know, it didn't work that way with mine. The dough shape was bad. You know, no matter what I did, it was bad. It's not like I don't know. My hands can't do it. I've got dog hands. And, you know, I would make these things, and at first it would look so bad that people would look and they'd say, well, you'll cover it up with the ornaments. But no, it didn't work that way. It just got worse and worse and worse. Everything was like, you know, even the simplest butter circle would end up looking like the vehicle wheels from the Flintstones. You remember those big things of stone? Yeah, like, I mean, it was just, yeah. So the reason we don't do that is because we're trying to offer something beautiful. Now, we don't offer beauty, and that's why termas can be so elaborate and so beautiful, like termas that depict the life of the Buddha or the lives of great gurus of our lineage and so on. That's why we do that, because we're offering artistic beauty. It's artistic beauty. And it's not that deities are pleased or displeased, but we offer them the best we can. So the outer offering is offering flowers and incense, things that are perceivable by the senses in order to gratify the senses of the wisdom deities. And these fundamentally, the main outer offerings here are what are called the 5 usual or common offerings, which are flowers primarily for the site, but also for the scent, fragrance. Incense primarily, again, for fragrance, but also for the site. Lights for those and also for warmth, because they represent warmth. And then perfume or scented water and food, which is where we start to get into the issue of termas, which we'll come back to in a second. However, our outer offerings, as Lama pointed out, are not limited to what is put on the shrine. The outer offerings actually include 3 different types of things. And they're called actually present, mentally emanated or imaginary, and recollected or taken out by the mind. Actually present offerings are what we've just discussed, what is displayed in the bowls on the shrine. But we use those as a starting point, almost like as a reminder for our imagination. So in many liturgies, it'll say, represented by this flower, I offer all the flowers there are in these billions of worlds, and so on. Now, if you ask, Lama said, well, if I can imagine it and think of all these things and mentally, emanate them, why do I need to actually put offerings? Because if we don't actually physically offer something, we're lying. We're lying. If you can offer something and you don't, it's a lie. What does it mean to say, I offer you all the flowers? I won't give you one damn flower. What good is it for me to say, I offer you all the flowers in the universe? That's like when people say, I want to save all sentient beings, but I'm sure I'm going to smack my kids. I mean, you can't do that. It just doesn't work. And we're smart enough to know that. It's not so much that it really upsets the deities, it upsets us. We know more. So that's why there needs to be the anchor, the physical basis of actual physical offerings. And they cannot, Lama said, we cannot let them be poisoned by our miserliness. No. Guru Rinpoche talks about this a great deal in the words of my perfect teacher. I'll let you read that for yourselves. I hope you have, and I hope you will again. But, he cites, like, for example, in Shantideva's book, he says, I am without wealth, I am indigent and poor, so all I can offer you is my this and that and the other thing. And Guru Rinpoche points out, yeah, fine for Shantideva to say, but we can't use that as an excuse. Not with our fancy this and fancy that. We may be poor by the standards of our society, but we're sure as hell not poor by the standards Shantideva was talking about. Let's get real. So there have to be physically present offerings on the shrine. Then on the basis of that, we imagine. And when we imagine that each of those offerings is multiplied until it fills all space. In other words, until it is infinite, limitless. And then the third type of offering, of outer offering, is the offering of the recollected. And those are the things that we know exist, but that we can't physically offer. Like the beauty of the sun, the light of the moon. We don't attempt to snare the moon and put it in a bowl, but we can offer its light We can offer the light of the sun. We can offer all the beautiful things that there are. So those are the three types of outer offerings: actually present, imagined, and recollected. And the difference between imagined and recollected, there's some crossover. But you can imagine offering things that don't exist. That's perfectly fine. Recollected is the recollection of things that do exist. The inner offering is to offer yourself. The inner offering is to offer everything from the skin or the body hairs on out inward. So we want to create a simple dividing line between the outer offering and the inner offering. The inner offering is your body. But it actually includes the four aspects of your being. And in the way you offer it, naturally, you are offering it, especially in this context, for the sake of purification, right? So the inner offering is done in order to purify your mind, your speech, your body, and your basic nature. But purify them doesn't mean change them. Even it means purify your thoughts, your concepts about them. And that is where the four pairs of fulfillment, which are the principle, what Lama quoted the liturgy as saying, they're called the great fulfillments of the peaceful and wrathful deities. That's where these come in. And that's why we spend so much time on them. And you'll know that we're there in the puja because the music changes. We use musical cues to remind ourselves of the view. So for example, when the great fulfillments are finished and we move back to other fulfillments, then we go back to a more commonly used melody. So, according to Jamgon Lodro Thaye here, each of the four main offerings of fulfillment here, which are present hundredfold on the shrine of the peaceful and wrathful deities, correspond to an aspect of our being. And that's why they're called the four pairs. The pair is the offering and what it corresponds to. So the first is the offering of Amrita. And that corresponds to our mind. So by offering Amrita, we are seeking to purify or transform our mind. The second is offering Rakta. Now Rakta can mean blood, but it can also simply mean the color red. And so it means not just the blood of a person or thing, but things that are red in nature. So for example, it's said that the cedar wood is the blood of among woods and so on. And Rakta corresponds to our speech. Then we come to terma. Here, Jamgon Lodro Thaye uses the Sanskrit word bali. Bali really means powerful or endowed with power, but it has the connotation of sacrifice. You're giving up something that you have. And that corresponds to our body. And that's one of the problems, actually, with my termas. The lamas say this. They say that, when people are taught to make termas, they tend to make them the shape of their own bodies. And it's not absolutely true, but dapat is doa. Dapat is doa. So that, my termas were always shaped like whatever my shape was at the time. And so definitely wouldn't be any better now. And then the fourth, which is really the final and sort of ultimate of the great fulfillments, is the offering of the lamps. But here the lamp is not simply just the lamps that we offer among the other offerings. Lama said that the lamp here, representative of our basic being, which is lucidity and emptiness that are not two different things, is correlated here with, for example, the four appearances of leapover and all of the most august aspects of the view and meditation of the great perfection. So these four samaya substances, amrita, rakta, terma, and lamps, and as you'll see when you look on our shrine in April, there have to be 100 of each of those things, is correlated with and represents the purity of one aspect of being. So that is the inner fulfillment. And it's called inner because it's what is within us, represented externally by these things, but really representative of not so much the objects of the senses, but our embodiments themselves. And then the secret fulfillment is the most wondrous and is the proximate or direct cause of Supreme Siddhi, or we could say is the best direct cause, or most efficient direct cause of Supreme Siddhi. But this is where we, Lama said, this is where we run into problems, and have historically. And a lot of Tibetan religious history, as he pointed out, explained what he said, is a story of those problems and what to do about it. The secret fulfillment is the offering of Tana Gana. Now, Tana, Jamgon Lodro Thaye here translates as union, and Gana, which usually means union or gathering, as liberation. So this is the practice of authentic Gana Chakra. Gana, of course, is gathering, and Chakra is wheel or circle. So Gana Chakra is an actual feast, a circle. And so this secret fulfillment is through the proper practice of Tanagana, union and liberation, in the context of the Gana Chakra. What we practice is more properly called not Gana Chakra, but Gana Puja, because we make a gathering offering, but it's not the full-blown Gana Chakra wheel. And Jamgon Lodro Thaye says, even that, what's called a concordant feast practice, which is what we do, has great benefits. So why do we do the concordant rather than the real thing? Well, this gets into where what Lama said about Vajrayana is wonderful, but you have to be able to. Historically, what happened was that during the time of the early spreading of the teachings, so during the 8th and 9th centuries, the individuals who were trained by such masters as Guru Rinpoche and Lama Mitra. Their Tibetan disciples, such as Nugchen Sanji Yeshe, Yeshe Gyamtso, and many others, were up to it. They had the sufficient merit, sufficient good fortune, sufficient karmic residue to understand and practice these teachings in their full measure, properly. By which, Lama said, he means that they had mastered the samadhi of the generation stage of the Mahayana, had control, full control over their energy through the completion stage of Anuyoga, and had full mastery of liberation of thoughts and mind, according to the practice of Anti-Yoga. Various events at the end of the 9th century, I think, and soon after that, caused the communities associated with the sutra emphasis, the monastic communities, to be wiped out. The tantric communities and the tantric lineage, the sutra lineage was not destroyed, but it went into hiding. The tantric communities, largely due to the action of Nugchen Sanji Yeshe in particular, survived a little bit. But what happened in the minds, Lama said, in sort of the popular level of the Tibetan religious community, was that they retained their great devotion for and respect for Tantra, but didn't any longer really know what it was. Now, he's not talking about the lineage holders. The lineage holders passed through time, and there remains an authentic, unbroken lineage from the great Nyingpo masters, many. But what happened was the rank and file of people became very naive. Now, don't forget that at the same time, by this point, Lama said, the people in India knew that Buddhism had spread to Tibet and was extremely popular, and the Tibetans were very jealous to Indian pundits. So what happened was that a lot of fake yogis, fake siddhas, fake pundits came to Tibet from India during that time and taught fake Tantra. It's important to understand this because it's not the case that the original teachings given by Guru Rinpoche were in any way corrupt or became corrupted. It was simply that the people's faith in them without sufficient education left them open to charlatans, a phenomenon of which we are not unfamiliar ourselves. And a lot of fakery happened. And the worst part of it was, the most infamous part was, Lama said, the fake practice of union and liberation. Basically, people thinking that orgies and ritual sacrifice were done. To put it in plain English, which is not what Guru Rinpoche taught. So at that point, what happened was that some of the rulers of the Tibetan kingdoms, because Tibet was not, at that point, was no longer one country, and hadn't yet again become one country, turned against the Vajrayana. And they wanted, they were so frightened by the improper practice of it, that when they invited authentic masters from India in the 10th and 11th centuries, they stipulated that they not teach Vajrayana. For example, the most famous of these in the second period of dissemination was Dipankara Sri Jana from West Bengal, whom we refer to as Atisha, or Atisha. Atisha means the best. It's like the best of people. His actual name was Dipankara Sri Jana. And still, if you meet people from West Bengal, you will meet a lot of Dipankaras. Dengsoyo, the Dorje Drakpo Dipankara Momodu. In West Bengal. And he, actually, some people mistakenly think that Atisha didn't know Tantra. That is, nothing could be further from the truth. Atisha had a greater knowledge and practical experience of Buddhist Vajrayana, Buddhist Tantra, than anyone living in India at his time. But he didn't teach it. Officially, he didn't teach it at all. Secretly, he did. There are lineages of Vajrayana coming in certain schools from Atisha, but they're not well known. And because he was invited by the kings, who basically said, don't teach Tantra. Teach all the common Buddhism and Mahayana you want. And so mostly Atisha did it. And what little Tantra he is known to have taught semi-publicly or officially was definitely the lower Tantras, mostly Kriya Tantra and so on. But it's not because he couldn't. In fact, Atisha had been a Siddha before he even became a monk in India. And so it's not that Atisha did not know the Vajrayana. Nobody knew the Vajrayana better. But he didn't because of the issue. So this brings up a point, since people, Lama said, we can always learn from history. And we have to understand that as incredibly profound and effective as the Vajrayana teachings are, and as he said, in this context, we're talking about what's called the pursuit of awakening through ritual. The rituals have to be bona fide. They have to be correct, they have to be authentic, and they have to be properly motivated. And so, okay, that finishes his.
Oh, so there. That in true Godong Jimsin Carres in that Bogology Jones and Kiko, true Godong Jimsin Carres. Tata America, the shooting Havita country. Shooting Havita, the Saha, the popular in the Yonzo, the Saha Chuki. Shinki Yonzo, take it, Sahata, Lamita, Zoba Chimboda, Saja Chimboda, Naro Chudota, then the change. Salon Chungo or Jajam, he took a manchekuri. The Kinki, one day the Kinki Lama Yaga, Levaka, but the house on the Taros on the song of the America, song of the and at the Paro Tini, Dramadani Sata, Southern Data, the Put Tampiori, Yonko, a decade, and you thought the Pula, the Ruin, not pay Haleva Papi or Tarna, Tarchit, any captive. Tatam Barodorje, the Azara, the Wang Vojuna, the Captain, Somba, Pinchata, Michu, the Soba, Longjan, to put on the whole race. The Caris in the Captain to put on the time, the Jagade Gerachimbo, Chons at Jagarwa. Jaga take up Sila, who's a sea got the sea the wrong, one check the sea the wrong, Pinta Yambasota, this is he could and drama. See Yonzo the Jala Yapajaga, Laka Yonzo the Stella Zigas, go the Kawa, Yonzo said. Jini Jala de Tobio Kimari, the logic and all logic now, but Caresina, Yak Katel Korio, Sariyaha, Yonzo 13, Borsons, Lama Javania, said the Anziga. Gandaya, Denda Oring, Azo Dada, Lata Salan Data do Cheranzo Nazo Book to the Deba Yovana, Tata Cheranzo Cha Yumi Michite, Yenaya Cheranzo Sapa, Chasogolo Tesala, Gawari, and Donna, Tendrella, Gankiri, takes a Tesa, Sapa, Tendrella Gankiri, Lomba de Bay, Messipo, Rene Yangya, Denagiri. Then the Ramada near only Kapsala, so Jeba Yoga, China, Jock Orgol, Topanga, Yomari, Sek Orgol, Topanga, Yomari, Tendrika, Langsam book, and I give in the tree of Kindawata, Sakani Hind, and you see the tree of Manga, Tendrika Mari. The Anna Chudela, Tapki, Himjoya, Lama Tratop, Lama del Himjoya, with any Chuda Lama, the country in the Chungo Bo country, the Lama Koraganyani countries, and the Korana, Kandada, these are Lamsa Challo, Tibanagi, jumping Lamsa Zomi. These are the Rian Rings, you rings on the Yamnis in Yabo, this and that, the Trudono, Pantrus, and this and Hasaya, Jorva, the Dorva say, the Gana Jakara and Gares, and the Dorva say, the Pomo Nika, Namjo Pomo Nikala, Salong around Topgyal, Dedo, Redo, Zangi, Zanto, Zanzo, Mevopa, Yonstropa, Chan, Yishita, Ripa, Songyo, Yirmi Chimbalon the Lada, Guna, Tada, Ezocho. Tadari, Nikala Tetsameva. Hingazoke, Chojum, Chuban Barandu, Zame Topa Quanta, Ronyam Kimbo, Jesus or Tangarika Zame Topa Yomar, Nagi Hasakami, Chati, 3 miles. Nagi Chantogami, Chanti, 3 miles. That they can't. They need a chance on Zato, teachers of Legazo. Sangagan Namjoba say at the Tunduki, and Re, Mahayan and Yandi Zolikas, the Sola, Desert and Zengo, the number. Sanghan Yamni said, the Nandol and Data do the Soka Kuko, Sanghan Yamni, one is it. Then you get going on the Joga Sanghan Yamni is taught to call a course of the need to get our Kerma and their corn and Nuggets on Holland, Lemon, so the Sonsaka Logico, the Demba, the Kona Bataminian, that's also these certain as okay, get a here quality. Then the Tandaka Corne, Tate Katsi, Madame Lama Chanazo, Tijatokamat, La Parton, Dilomba, Tijatokamat. Nana Tijatokamari, Jatangarana, Omnation Mari, Nini Yontin Yomari, Somni Malakeba Yokimari, Himari, Yeda and Pachachi Hindoko Mari, the Lama Mother, Pay Ripa Jantazo, Get a heap on the pay. Rene Chutin Toto, get a hink about it. Then the Chuti Kades and Pariumita, Magiato, Jonas, not Chuti Kasi Lendo. Tana Mahayo Kieran Gona, Katis Sakati, Tonjaki, Sarton Yemi Kandar. Sang Ha Zalon Yamnisina, Tanga Lonsem Yemi Kandari. What Jaja Gondir gets long gone to Mari. Long say Yemi the Kandalata. Zalon takes on the car runs on to. They don't hear me go over Kandamon the church. Nyamar Nalong other country. Young mother Toro in the point and Ramo and Nika can go Tawachipari to the Tawachipari. Nika can win the Depatana Moda Yemin 3,000. DJ, then take the winner. Sangana told him call on the road, Jaja Porto. They Madoja Porto Mari, DJ about the Goya reason. That they did on this as Zabzasina, and it is a Zaton, Mark Zaton Pom, the reason.
It would be reasonable for you to ask or wonder why I'm going on about this. since it's really only peripherally mentioned in our text when he says the practice of union and liberation as in an actual Gana Chakra, or even the concordant practice of Gana Puja still has great benefit in this regard for the purposes of fulfillment. The reason why I think it is necessary for me to mention this is that Buddhism in general and the Vajrayana teachings in particular are still quite new in America. Which means that you still don't have a sufficient number of samples, test samples, we could say, to be able to tell the difference between, or easily tell the difference between a genuine teacher and a charlatan. This situation is exacerbated, we could say, by the fact that we now live in the information age. As well, most teachers who come here, whether they do so because they wish to be of the utmost benefit, or whether they do so because they wish to attract the most followers, power, and money. In either case, most teachers who come here teach those things that Americans find most attractive. Dzogchen, Mahamudra, the six dharmas of Naropa, and the things that go along with that, and all sorts of other tantric teachings and tantric trinkets. This is not in itself a bad sign. We have a saying that where deities proliferate, so will demons. It is a natural thing that where there is spiritual blessing, there will also be spiritual peril. To return to the Tibetan history as an example, what happened in the period between the early dissemination under Guru Rinpoche and the later dissemination of the Dharma in Tibet was that the Tibetans' devotion to Dharma did not dissipate. They had tasted it and they wanted more. And since they felt that Dharma came from India, they correctly believed that India was the origin or source of the Buddhist teaching. They favored Indian teachers. So it became known among Indians with some connection to Buddhism that if they wanted gold, and don't forget, we're talking about a time where poverty was well, it still is, isn't it? But where gold was scarce, and there was gold in Tibet. Tibetans knew where it was, and they were ready to offer it to pundits. It became known that if you wanted gold, you had to go to Tibet. That was where the goal was. And so, while some of the teachers who came to Tibet were as wonderful as Guru Rinpoche and Tashi, some of them were less educated and less scrupulous. And in a sense, it was the enthusiasm of the Tibetans themselves that caused this to happen. Now, I don't know, Lama said, if you're as enthusiastic about Buddhism as the Tibetans were in the 9th and 10th centuries. And I don't know if you have the same kind of veneration for Tibetan and other Himalayan masters that the Tibetans at that time had for those from India and Nepal. What I do know is that Americans really like new stuff. You want the new thing, the latest thing, you want the updates, the new model, and everything, you want the latest technology, spiritual technology as well as physical. So what I would advise you is don't buy Dharma or Dharma teachers as though you were buying something at the Apple Store. Don't purchase it uncritically. Take time to carefully examine the teachings presented to you, whether it's by Tibetans or by American teachers. Take care, carefully examine whether what they teach is really what was taught by the Buddha or not. Because nowadays, anyone can say anything. And examine the teachers. Before you form a Vajrayana relationship of teacher and student with them, examine them carefully. And listen to your, if you have misgivings, if you have, you would say red flags, pay attention to those. Because he said once you enter into a formal, locked-in Vajrayana teacher and student relationship, that teacher becomes for you an object of the first group downfall. In other words, if you, having received empowerment from a teacher, thereafter turn against them, that will destroy you. So it's much better to be careful beforehand. So don't jump into Vajrayana relationships. That's about teachers. Now about practice. I cannot, Lama Tratop said, I cannot, because it's not my role in general, and secondly, because as an individual, I would say I'm not qualified to do so. I cannot appraise your spiritual state and decide whether you're ready for real Vajrayana practice at the level we're talking about here today or not. Only you can. But to do that, you have to be honest and free from self-deception, or delusion, or wishful thinking. For example, to engage in the practices, the Vajrayana practices of union and liberation, the people doing it, the couples and so on, have to be free from any thought of clean and dirty, any thought of nasty and nice. You have to be capable of remaining immersed in your mind, in that awareness that is your mind's true nature, even while you engage in elaborate ritual. You can't approach such practices when you're still at the level where you are swayed by the social conventions of your culture. People who, when they come to a tsok, say, well, don't give me any meat, I don't eat meat. Or don't give me the liquor from the kapala, I don't drink, I can't drink. Such people are not qualified for the Vajrayana practice at this level. You are not qualified. If you have those ideas, if you have those rules, if you feel you need those rules, then you are admitting that you are not qualified. Those rules, Lama said, they're fine. Being vegetarian is fine for Hinayana and Mahayana. It's fine. It's excellent. It's even laudable. Having a thing about alcohol, not having alcohol under any circumstances, that's fine for Hinayana and Mahayana. Nobody in a Hinayana or Mahayana context will ever make you drink, will ever ask you to eat meat. So that's where you should be, if that's your attitude. That's your place. That's your level. It is not fine, he said, for Vajrayana. You can not eat meat, not drink on your own, that's fine. But when you come to a feast, if you're there, you take part. You don't pick and choose. If you pick and choose, you've broken the samaya of the feast to start with. This is why Lama said, I've heard that His Holiness Dorje Rinpoche used to say, do not bring your Shravakayana prejudices to my feasts. But only you know, each of you as an individual, only you know what level you're really at, what grade you're really in. I cannot appraise you. But you have to ask yourself, what degree of clarity do I really have in the visualization of my yidam in daily practice? Now, if you don't do visualization of a deity in daily practice, then this whole discussion doesn't concern you to begin with. You're not even in the room, so to speak. But you have to ask, if you qualify as a Vajrayana practitioner, what level of clarity, what degree of stable pride, clear appearance, and recollection of purity have I really gained? What is my ability with the practices of the channels and winds? Not what I would like to be able to do, but how long can I hold my breath in the proper way, with proper teaching, proper supervision? And through holding my breath, what level of control do I really have over my energy? And when engaged in practices that involve couples, do we both have the same view? Do we both have the same freedom from thoughts and reservations and prejudices, or not? So I mentioned that as an aside to point out that each of us, Lama said, each of us has to really kind of govern ourselves and assess ourselves, our own ability. Dene tama de tata droga.
Tatan Rosari.
Rosari.
Rosari. So the Rosari, Sabijek, Sambane, Sangosan. Go some Sazi, Yamcha, Dorje, Hinga, the yours, and the Secamanicas, sorry. Oh, then the Yakon de Datsu and the Sepe Yontin, that day Yonti carrying your colleries and here collery. Nekapso, Sitata, go some Jota, the dog Sava, the Sepe, Lady Japan, Yamcha, Chenchipakon, Chekisi. That de la Tauri. Nyamcha Tamji Tanika, Nyamcha Porter Tamji Tanika, Sim Desamatoba Yiki Jula Jayata, Nala Mandawaka, Ye Karen of Waliata, Nala Mandawaka Toba Jayata, Nala Mandawaka, Sim Kipa, the Proa, the Gana, the Sona, Mambo, Yalemtori, that they are yin and my cocular codere, they don't the Nyamcha Gentipa Kon Cheki. Tatu Song told Dorji, he Dorji, yes. Go Dorje, Son Dorje, To Dorje, Chidorje, Gompanga, Sepacurte, Sama Sam, Tap, Tartuba in the Sunros, De Daria, Jimika, Jule, Jimika Jule, Jankorja La, De Namjin Tin, Nam your Pomo Nam, Tupo, Zamkis, the Tudorzo, Tatanga Zota, Tudor, Tundor, to Beans, and Sanga here for Tudors, Nya, so get the Patana moon, the Tudor deck, now the Tupo, Zamkisa, the Dagatina. Torto is Hanya Pardo. This Sangha Chechuri, Tepatana, Yichi Una Tortokari, Yichi Mina Yang, Yichi Miva Lega, the Kayan Rokamari. Then the Temdro or a Tinjon, Yichi Una, the Tinjon, the origin, Namjo Poma Namji, Tupa, Zamji, Jakarta, Poma Namji, Tupa, Zawa, the Yenaga, Tamsen, Yamcha, Yamkane. They get about them, you go so to the some Jimachapa, Dimber Jortes, some Goson to some Jimachapa, you did jet about that. That's what the Patanage, you get Polo songs, you get some check you are some you get some check the deep going somebody, going somebody, Karina more, you get Polo to Kigasa, Polo to Gisala, sends on that day, Sangala Mikatako,
Satusum, the conduit is
the
matcha, Tama, the
Oh, that they sal. Tangaso des lemas Rumanium, Lamjiki Banagi, Rete, Kalekale di Sala, Lebricot, and Holotogica Sal, Lenjatropan, Euros on the Deke code. Yes, on Bensonos, that the Ranga comes at the Nego, the Lama Sons of the Negayana, then they call it Jekatela Kaya song, then the day Yasari, then Sani Dini, Madotseku, then they sort of draw the Somebody
did son, then it don't do a down Teneo.
Oh, yeah, so
Chick, the Yana, the Dering,
the Naya, nothing. The
Denisha,
the Nayan and Dixari. They must song you, but just the Nayan and Dixari.
Trixari.
This honey to read the tiger.
The third and final topic within this section on Samaya purification, following upon confession and fulfillment, is the result of doing these things. What is the result? And the result is explained by Guru Rinpoche concisely in all wrongdoing and impairments caused by your actions of the three gates, body, speech, and mind, will be purified or pacified. And you will manifest the wisdom of the four Vajras. Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Thaye explains the benefits of the proper performance of confession and fulfillment. For example, as we do during the subtle essence Padmasambhava practice, are both immediate and long-term. The immediate benefit is that your the veil or veils caused by your thoughts and concepts about your body, speech, and mind. And as well as all of the impairments and breakages of samaya you have incurred through misdeeds of body, speech, and mind. So both your negative attitude towards your body, speech, and mind and your actual misdeeds of body, speech, and mind. All of this will be purified or pacified immediately. The ultimate benefit, the long-term benefit, is that when you pacify or remove the stain or veil of concepts, all that remains is things as they are. So the true nature of your body, speech, mind, and basic being. So therefore, ultimately, you will manifest or reveal the state of Vajra body, Vajra speech, Vajra mind, and Vajra wisdom. And so therefore, in a sense, he says, the practice of the Vajrayana practice of confession and fulfillment, of purification, is much more than just a way of preventing lower rebirth. It is actually the ultimate way of achieving the final fruition. And the reason for that is simply that there is nothing to be added to your basic being. All that we need to do is remove what prevents us from seeing ourselves as we truly are. And that is primarily and most efficiently done through these purification practices. Therefore, in the Stainless Confession Tantra, it says, simply through hearing the names of these mandala deities, yogis and yoginis will purify and fulfill all violations and breakages of root and branch samaya. They will therefore come to possess the inconceivable body, speech, mind, qualities, and activity of all Buddhas, and will be spontaneous and will spontaneously achieve the level that is called the great gathering of the wheel of letters, or we could say wheel of syllables if you want. If you look at the liturgies of secret, profound essence Padmasambhava, you'll see that a lot of different levels are mentioned. But basically, the highest level of awakening spoken of in the Mahayoga Tantras is what's called in the common tradition, common to those new and old schools, the 13th level of Gradual. And in the Nyingpo tradition in particular, it's called this level of the great gathering of the wheel of mothers. In a shaggy
Don't say.
Don't say.
Oh.
Don't know.
Don't get it, my own. But you don't take
Don't know
your
what they
don't do what they don't. Sounds not that bad. Oh, that's. Oh, yeah, that's about don't do it. So you did not don't do it. Say that. Yeah, Zumi moves out the phone. Sorry, Jarvis, Ninja Sansem Ki, Kirab Sam Donje, Nisan Zara, Tave Lata, Cube King Yeve, Dini Lender, King Rantorne, Lamji on the Torming Agan Charles. That it. Lamji on the Torming Agan Charles, Dama Karaki, Nice, already done. Lamji Kaiser Top Yang, Zabal Lamala, Sanji Musan Tom Yichita, Garden Kissetin, but don't you keep Drante, Zooming Chimantopumu, Kona, Yami sort of zonde, Zartan, Bonso, that the packaging was Sahari. Zabalama the garden the two Naya, Majiba, Sanji Mumtonga Deba. Sanjing Mulaba Garden Cheva, Sanjing Mumtonga Deba Jetan, Toba Jetan, Simjitam Ninja Jetan, Samba Jetan. Some Ninji, Linjay the Jen, Janazo, Tony Ninjung, the Juror, Songjok Toba to the Jego, Songjok, Hartoko, Doja Songjok, Lama Garden, the Lama Debata, and the Jeja Madana, Naya Yondi Jejo, Sahari. But Chapori. Tral Purpata and Tral Purpa Kasitam Tranga the Yandri. Lama the Tepata, not the Kajiki the Jin, Trala Kona Marjabana. They do George Partia the Chandra, Lama the Tepata, Mevana, Topa and the Jet. They do Konga Jambo, Yakomata, the Tambo, Sanji Genda Meva, Lama George Jambo. Who the Jambo took him for Kongazandove, Tepajimbo Zandove, Jambu Lama, Jambu Peter, that's what they tried to come and king Ibara Pori. Ko Jambo Mado Him, the Jambu Peter the Zeg in the Tarito, Tundriki, Mahi Makilmari, we care for this. They are like a part what you can say. Tata told you call up the Hago Minis on the zone to get it. Put the cup, they do data too much of Charles. Then the big Zabzab Govichi, the Konabaki, Yarimato, Samala. Chan Chanceria, the Tapik the Zoo and Dorje taken out, they mark Koya. Then the daily Gupawando, Jumtin, Chiaba, the Gupawando, and Solomata make it to the Yaga. Then the Georgia Dairy, what Chokia Gagoya did, what you low Chokia Sandongoya, who did dig up the place. Same you mother, Cuba Saxon, Cuba Chimbo Saxon, same you terma, the Cuba Sango Chasonary. Razayala Sabambo said, and Chima Majoki, Mukon Yami saw the Zonde, Zartan Don. Kachaki Simjin and the Surita Travel, Samba and Yingi, Sime for Gongen, Tamji Sanjik Sarum, Gobernupe, Sanjo Santa, the Gis. That's Suri Travel, Sanjo with Semde, Tony Gatawa Tolika, the Jekari Mato, Sanjo with Sem Jejo Marita. Sorry, maybe Sanjo with Sem Sayade. Take what Chimbo got, Namdo the Gin, the Corwa. Namdo the Jeba Yon, take what Jimbo Sancho Santo Janko, Namdo Deba Mare, Danger, Sori Texaco. Rangi 다기 지와 세야데 혁치아르 빼 혁침보 세야데 다기 지 세야데 오리데 다롱마 다 세야데 잡아데 오리 다 세야데 잡아데 오다 띠네 로장도 거데 데데 오네 특별 상하게 냠니 시네 동니가 따와 줄을 제제데 게띠네 당 오네 소리미 삼인기데 진 거리 디 동니인기데 진 디토데 치메 바케게 남카타다 냠 심지 담기게 산지게 살아 군도게 로제야데 투상 곰발레 송 드마메 키럽 사무 타니 자책 장나 메기바 타니 자책 장나 메기바 사야데 다디 디토네 거론 보지 가도게 데리 빈저다 데니마도 빈저다 철로 송야데 거론 보지 가고야 데리 저기나 마도 예가고마 빈저다 격치야 망치야데 타니게 책이 점다다 타니게 책자장도 조면도 타니게 책다 잘거리 타톱 라마마도 빈저다 담제 상계다고 라마지를 띠는 맹아 용용을 상계거든 상계의 유용 용소 조바데 맹아 용용을 띠는 공토를 동다하고 거든 대대대저 타니자는 미기바 야다도 동다 내상 설견도 자 니게 상마 설견도 자 동다 가래리다 오네데 동다 가래리다 책장 많이 봐 동대 가래리다 삼다야데 계지모 특바 연범제 따변 콘데 라다게 특바 연제게 따와 라미아도 조바 진보 주바 men제게 따와 다다 레전드를 차게 잡아 삼모 땅도네 동다 냠니 고리죠 란돌 킨예고 근접다 동담 담바니 이제 소리리 롱웨 객진 랑기 조네스 다 근접다 동담이 근접 차차 끼고기 마서 동다가 차끼고 또 근접다 동담이 딘 일미도 또네 또 토바게 삼모 또 디케킨 또 딘 일미 데마니 일미도 또 토바레 랑기 조네 람냥스람 조다 용디 남베 절메바 랑게 차와네 기두세 베다 쪼라마고 바다 디캅서 라마다 사징은 동게 대바지는 베다 쪼라마고 바게 고 기두 라마나 칼로 서바나기 되니 또바나 인강가 거기 기러들이 차와네 기두 라루지 된 템저 초바나 제행메도见过了 定真正세야 돼 라 주저这个本제행메도 见没到다 소화的라마的主zem도 제행메도 见就 템저 조루 주결的 되네 저와 될的 되네 자체의 제거 되나게 매도 랑기의 제바 연어서.
So now we come to the brief final section of this fourth part of the whole text. The presentation of the path here is divided into the planting of seeds, the nurturing of the seeds once planted, the preparation of the soil, the planting of seeds, the nurturing of the seeds once planted, the protection of those growing sprouts from light and frost, and then the enhancement of their growth. So the section that we are concluding right now is the fourth of those five. The correction of problems in meditation, the dispelling of impediments, is how to protect your practice from impediments while you are engaged in the path. And began with a brief statement, and then we had a lot of details, which we just completed. And now it turns to a summary, a conclusion, which explains the whole thing in relatively few words. It's relative. In addition, emphasize unbearable devotion. Give rise to impartial compassion and bodhicitta. With profound discernment, seek the innermost meaning or point of the teachings. Transcend through the view and make proper distinctions in kanda. In that way, becoming self-liberated or self-liberating the great obstructor that is partiality with regard to the two truths, all of the qualities of the path will effortlessly and naturally arise. Among all means of dispelling impediments on the path, foremost are devotion, compassion, and integration of view and kanda. The first of these is the devotion. If you come to really believe that your root guru is an actual Buddha, and if you therefore feel the tremendous longing or yearning that comes from gratitude for what the root guru has given you, that devotion, unbearable in the sense that you cannot keep yourself from coming to tears, that devotion just by itself is the essence of all practice. Because it is the essence of all practice, it cuts through all possibility of error or deviation. It's not based on figuring anything out. It's not based on any kind of technique. It transcends and cuts through everything all at once. So if you want to be free from impediments and error in your meditation practice, first thing to do is to emphasize devotion for your Guru. The second thing to be emphasized is compassion. Now, as Lama Tratop expanded and said, genuinely impartial compassion only arises as the natural affect of the realization of emptiness. The compassion that we give rise to in our practice of the Mahayana, including the compassion that we give rise to through taking and sending and all the other techniques designed to generate love and compassion. All of these are, in fact, somewhat contrived, and by necessity, therefore, partial, because they are produced by thought and maintained by thought. Nevertheless, we have to always do our best to give rise to, repeatedly, constantly, that bodhicitta, which is the wish to bring all beings, without exception, to the state of Buddhahood. the more that wish becomes heartfelt, an actual desire to bring all beings to Buddhahood, and less a duty, the freer you will be from obstacle and error. The third thing is to use your intelligence as best you can to cultivate through hearing or learning, through thinking or analysis, and especially through meditation, a stainless, correct, and profound understanding of the teachings. And this should not be a mere dependence on views and terminology. This is why, as Lama said, Guru Rinpoche said, if they don't realize this, even Panditas are just deluded. He's not saying that Pandits are by nature more deluded than uneducated people. He's saying that without knowledge of the true nature of things, all other learning is mere conventional, is merely conventional. So seek the innermost or true point of all the teachings. And in doing so, avoid the biggest pitfall, the biggest impediment of all. And that is losing one of the two truths to the other. The biggest pitfall is when people have some understanding of the view, but then as a result, they lose track of proper behavior. In the spouting the view, they behave poorly. The other version of that, which is equally bad, is where people become so obsessed with the issue of proper behavior that they reify their thoughts and perceptions and lose track of, or never even begin to understand the view. So you have to avoid both of those. With the view, which looks downward, as though from the sky down, of higher vehicles, transcend reification. But with the conduct, which is actually climbing upward through the successive or gradual vehicles, make the correct distinctions between what to do and what not to do. In that way, you will become free from that great obstructor, which is falling into the extreme of ignoring relative truth through allegiance to absolute truth, or ignoring absolute truth through allegiance to relative truth. So if you can do these, take devotion to your root guru, emphasize devotion to your root guru, cultivate impartial bodhicitta as best you can. Try to understand the essence of the teachings and avoid the extremes of losing the view to the conduct, or the conduct to the view. Then simply through practicing all of the qualities, all of the attributes of the path will naturally arise. without your having to particularly seek them out individually. Just as when the interdependent environmental factors are present, it's springtime, there is the right weather and the right moisture. The grass, trees, and flowers will grow of themselves. Nobody has to go up and try to pull the leaves out of the tree branches or pull the flower petals out of the things. So that completes that section. Lama made some remarks though. He said, with regard to the emphasis on the Guru, of course we find this in the original Indian teachings on the Vajrayana. But one of the innovations, we could say, that Lord Atisha made when he brought his teachings to Tibet was that he recognized that for Tibetans it needed to be spelled out. For people in India at that time, if you simply said Buddha Sharanam Gacchami, they understood, I take refuge in the Buddha to include the Guru. But he realized that for Tibetans it had to be spelled out. So he added what's called the fourth jewel, the Guru. And so the shortest refuge vow or prayer that you'll hear Tibetans say always begins Lama Lachanso, Lama Lachanso, I take refuge in the Guru. Before they say, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. In one sense, Lama said this was a reflection of Atisha's consummate devotion for his own Guru, the Sumatran Sumatran Dhammakirti. We have to say the Sumatran Dhammakirti because there's another famous Dhammakirti and they're two different guys. So they usually don't call him Dharmakirti, they just call him Limpa, which means the Sumatran. But that seems a little bit, he did have a name, so call him the Sumatran Dhammakirti. So in part because of his own devotion for his teacher, and also because he realized it needed to be made clear, that Tisha emphasized that. And he also emphasized the continuous recitation of the refuge vow to such an extent that he gained the nickname among Tibetans, Refuge Pandit. And some people have misunderstood that to mean that Tisha was called the Refuge Pandit because he didn't know anything else. All he knew to teach was the refuge vow. So wherever he went, he just said, just say this. That's not the case. We have to look at things, and then Lama took that further, extended that further, that aside, took it more aside. We have to look at things in context. Otherwise, if you take things out of context and hold them up as sound bites, then you're just going to end up with endless contradictions and drive yourself and probably others crazy. For example, Kongtrol Rinpoche, in his Words of My Perfect Teacher, was very critical of the way meat was offered in feasts in Tibet. And some people have taken his words out of context and said there should be no meat at Tzolk's because Kongtrol Rinpoche said so. And they'll quote that line totally out of context. Kongtrol Rinpoche was an emanation of the omniscient Chokgyur Lingpa, in whose terma it says, Shacha me miron, It is unfit that there not be both meat and liquor at the feast. Was Palto Rinpoche disloyal to his own origin and missionaries? Palto Rinpoche was talking about the fact that in spite of Guru Rinpoche's statement that there should be meat and liquor at the feast, Guru Rinpoche never said, and you should eat meat until you're sick to your stomach and drink liquor at the feast until you're rolling in the aisles and fall down vomiting unconscious. Guru Rinpoche never said that. Palto Rinpoche was simply saying, we've taken it too far. We've gotten out of hand. And what Palto Rinpoche was specifically talking about with the issue of meat was where animals were killed just for the sake of a feast. That's what he was objecting to. So Lama mentioned this as saying, don't think you're clever when you can look up words and pull them out. And this is often done in English, but it's some people do it in Tibetan too. Pull words out of a book and say, well, so-and-so said that, so you're wrong to do this, and what about that? Use discernment and understand the context of things. Otherwise, you're just going to tie yourself into knots and everybody else.
Okay, 5 minutes, right? So. 我做了乐当机这把你同内一个这那放子，这个南街巴拉巴周巴也这边做了做我有给我的也给我个说那一个走走。 说那一天的早晚，大把个年到把有三九三年人不，莫接把那姐姐把娘把妹把，公的公的妹把有先见当街的当天就来见，跟着当街大头东把人。 Sanjo samba kanda saryo ba deda kan mola ba jo sanje ne je de tambe ga jar kan de ja de le ba mi zo de be sanga je si je sanda ja be tra ji yo Also, okay, thank you everyone.